My name is Carolyn, and I talk to the spirit world. Travel with me to a dimension filled with love, light, and joyful surprises. Welcome to Carolyn's Psychic Playroom.
Hi everyone, Carolyn Wilkins here, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to yet another edition of Carolyn's Psychic Playroom. I'm really excited about my guest that I have today. As you know, each episode of the Psychic Playroom, I've been focusing on bringing in guests who work at that intersection between spirituality and creativity and can offer not only a chance for us to experience their work in all different disciplines and fields, but tips for the rest of us as to how we can continue to grow our own spirituality and creativity in these challenging times. I don't think anyone would deny that right now, the more creative you can be, the more connected you can be with your own sources of inspiration and guidance, the better off you are. So, before I bring up my guest, I always like to offer a reading to the collective. As you know, I am a psychic myself and a psychic medium, and I love to read from these Akashic Records tarot cards. And what I would like to do today is just pull a couple of cards. I'm reading this for you, coming to you in early November. As you know, there are many large events coming up, including our national election here for those of us in the US. And I would prefer, actually, I'm going to step off trying to read sort of predictive kind of reading, and instead, what I want to focus on and what I want to ask the cards is, what do we need to do, regardless of who wins the election and regardless of what happens on November 3rd? What do we need to do to keep ourselves in the highest vibration and the highest frame of mind? Because the truth is, no matter who wins or no matter what happens, we still have our own work to do. Whatever you consider to be your work in the world, your highest and best offering to the world, we still have to do that, regardless of who's in power, which party, what things. There may be more or there may be less obstacles, but the fact remains, we must carry on as spiritual beings with our own highest and best, offering our creativity to the world, offering our spiritual perspective, and alignment and view of the wholeness and connectedness that we believe to be the truth. So, with those parameters in mind, I'm going to pull a couple of cards. What do we need to know as spiritual and creative beings here in the Psychic Playroom? What do we need most to develop during this time? What would be the most helpful thing? And I'm asking the cards and my guides to speak through the cards and sort of give us a perspective here. So I'm spreading out my cards, and now I'm pulling one, and this is, oh, look at here, the Muse. Couldn't be better. Couldn't be better. So, as I say, no matter who's in power, no matter which party wins, no matter whether you're in agreement or disagreement, you always have your muse, you always have your creative power available, and this muse is here to help you and remind you that we are bigger and broader than any outcome of any election. We are magical beings. We are stardust, as Joni Mitchell famously wrote. We're stardust, we're beings of light. So now is the time to connect with your muse. If you've been thinking about, oh, gee, I'd like to do something creative and do some creative work, I would say to you, now is the time. The weather is getting dark. It's getting cold, at least here in the northern hemisphere. And we're beginning to kind of, all of us sort of nest in and sort of cocoon in. So, this is the ideal time to be thinking about that creative project that you've always wanted to do. So, with that in mind, I would like to now roll ahead and introduce my guest on the Psychic Playroom today, and her name is Melanie Alberts. She is amazing. She's a medium like myself. She can talk to the spirit world, but she's also a poet. She's also an artist. She's an extremely creative person, a graduate of Emerson College right here in Boston, and an actress, among other things. Just an amazingly gifted woman with so much to offer us right now. So, without further ado, I'm going to invite you to take a look at this lovely interview that we recorded several weeks ago now. Um, but yeah, Melanie Alberts. Check it out. So, hello everyone. I'm so excited to have as my guest today Melanie Alberts, and she's a guest in my Psychic Playroom. She is both a medium, an artist, and a writer. She's also just an amazing human being. If I'm not mistaken, she's coming to us in this moment from Austin, Texas. So please say hello to the people, Melanie.
Hello, it's so wonderful to be in your playroom, Carolyn. I love it.
Yay! So I mentioned all these wonderful credentials that you have. And one of the first questions that I always like to ask people is, first of all, since you are a medium, when did you realize that this was something you could do? Have you always had this awareness that, oh, I'm psychic, or did you gradually grow into it? Tell me a little about that.
Well, I know that at the age of 4, I had an out-of-body experience, and I was under anesthesia. And in the operating room, I was floating above my body, looking down at a minor operation, but they still had to put me under because my lip was busted open. And as a 4-year-old, there's no way I was going to sit for stitches.
Mm.
But there I was looking down on the doctor and nurse. And later, when I spoke to my mother about this at home, she said, "Stop lying.
Yeah.
Stop making things up. You weren't doing that. No way," and so I
Oh,
kept getting that kind of feedback, and I would make up stories about people in pictures. The little boy Blue, a picture of him hung in our bedroom, and I would make up stories about him. He was a real child, and I somehow connected. And I always wanted to speak to ghosts, something I just
nice.
had an interest in. My grandmother told me that she saw the ghost of her mother when she was 6. And at that age, I was like, I want to see ghosts so bad. How can I see
Nice.
ghosts? What can I do? And I kind of expected them to arise at the foot of my bed, materialize. That never happened. Instead, what happened was I was taught to draw by my older sister, Valerie, and she taught me how to draw faces. And that's all I wanted to draw. I just wanted to draw faces. And I would draw the faces I saw in my mind. And we moved around a lot. I would use drawing to sort of calm myself down in a new situation. I would just draw constantly. And sometimes a teacher would come over and look at a drawing I made, and they were quite cartoonish. I wasn't a fine artist. And he would say, or she would say, that looks like somebody I know. That looks like my grandfather. And I would have an expression, I would have a certain look, and I'd be like, oh, that's interesting. And it happened way too often for me to think, this is a coincidence. But I didn't realize what I was doing until I studied mediumship when I was an adult. And I realized that the faces I was drawing had information that people could understand. And I actually have one here, the first drawing. This is very similar to how I drew. I now draw better than this. I have taken some lessons, but I would just draw a face that I saw in my mind. And in the mediumship class, I said, okay, his name is Nicky. He died when he was young. He had very intense eyes. And I gave all this information. He lived by the beach. He was very introspective. And somebody understood him. Said, yes, it was my cousin Nicky. I babysat him when he was 10 and he died as a teenager.
Wow.
And it just kind of dawned on me. It's like,
just a little descriptive about the picture just to share. This is a boy. He looks like he's about, what, maybe 7, 8 years old, something like that. He's got, as you say, very intense eyes and kind of a haircut that reminds me of the Beatles, like that.
Yeah, it's like a bowl haircut.
But the idea is that spirits would basically come to you, and then you have the gift of being able to draw that spirit and having it, in fact, turn out to be a real person, which when you first started this, I'm gathering you had no idea that you thought you were just doodling. So
right.
now tell us about this wonderful lady that you have.
So I did another drawing in another class. I did hundreds of these drawings, and these are just a few that I was able to get photographs for. And this is a woman who was who lived in Germany. And let me see if I can get out of the way. And behind the portrait that I drew, there's a woman with like a fairground scene. That's a kind of an abstract Ferris wheel and roller coaster. And I had all this information about her. And a woman, her name was also Melanie in Germany. She said, that's my great great aunt. And she could understand the information, and she provided the photograph. Now, we can sometimes draw somebody who looks a lot like somebody else that you might know, but the information, the evidence has to match. And there has to be enough information matching, such as their name, their age, where they lived, personality quirks, things like that, that I would be able to get. And if we understand enough of that, we consider that a pretty good link.
That is amazing. And so on what is my right hand side of your thing, there's a photograph of the actual Melanie from Germany.
No, this is the aunt, the great great aunt.
Okay, the aunt.
From the 1950s.
And then you drew her before seeing the photograph,
right,
or knowing anything about, and you also brought through all of this other evidential information about her. So how amazing is that?
And this is, I'll just go briefly through another one. This is a gentleman who I drew. Typically, I draw people when they're younger. This gentleman came through when he was older, when he was more middle-aged. And I got a name, and I got his interest in history and military background. And he looks not exactly like the photograph. I think I captured some of his essence, but it just, again, goes to show that the evidence was accepted, and then the picture there's some similarity there. And I would also draw people that I didn't know. I had been talking to you about a drawing that I did in a circle when I got information, the name Arne, and I got that he was an architect. And nobody in the circle, which is another group of people and mediums who, would help each other develop as a medium, nobody understood him. So I went online and typed in Arne Architect, and Arne Jacobson popped up. And he looks so much like the fellow I drew, and he had died the day before.
Oh, wow, that's great. And what is really interesting to me as I'm looking at the picture on the right-hand side again is the photograph of this man. And without knowing anything about this man or ever having heard of him before, you in a mediumship development circle drew the picture on the left there, and the name came, and also other information that you were later able to validate. So this brings up an interesting question. Many people who are sort of skeptical, if you will, about mediumship and all that, they're often not aware of how detailed and accurate the information from the spirit world can be. And I find it stunning that, for example, you didn't just say, I am drawing a person who looks kind of like, and I think his name might be A, and maybe he's in some kind of creative field.
Yeah.
No,
Now I
you
got
have
very specific
details.
information. Yeah.
Exactly. And
It's
that's
important to do that.
impressive. It is important if, yeah, for those who can. That, and so I know that you also, in addition to your work as a spirit artist, you also are a writer, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that you've also studied acting and that you've done a little bit with that. So could you just very briefly tell us a little bit about that route that led you?
Yeah, I think being creative I just had to express myself. And theater was something I wanted to do ever since I was little. I wanted to be a ballet dancer. I wanted to act. And my mother was like, no, you can be a nurse or a teacher. So she actually went to music school. She was a pianist.
Interesting.
And her parents sent her to music school, but she didn't want to go because of all the drugs.
Yeah, that's
And she
hilarious.
left and she went to nursing school, and she dropped out of nursing school because she couldn't do the chemistry.
Oh, that is
So anyway,
so
so
funny.
we're very creative. My father's an artist, was an artist. We're very creative people. So I couldn't help it. And so I went to Emerson College to study acting. And my first semester, I think I ran into somebody who was a creative writing major. I was like, that's what I really want to do. I want to do creative writing so I can always create, not have to worry about being, you know,
Nice.
accepted for a role. And so I studied
Nice.
poetry, and I left school to work for the National Park Service doing costumed interpretation in Faneuil Hall for yeah
Wow.
for the constitute was the amendment to the Constitution. And so,
So
yeah,
you were one of those people dressed up in the colonial garb with the little
yeah.
hat and the fluffy little dress, and you would act out, essentially acting out a role of some historical scene. Is
Right.
that the
We
idea?
actually did town hall debates in Faneuil Hall, and we were
Wow.
interspersed in the audience, and we would stand up and debate, and it was a lot of fun. That was a wonderful career that I had. But I was also having interesting paranormal experiences, out of body experiences. I had a near death experience. I
Mm.
was led at one point in spirit. I had an out of body experience to find the body of this dog. Let me get out of the way.
Oh,
His name was
wow.
Bear, and he died,
Okay.
and we didn't know where he was.
Mm.
One day, I felt my awareness coming out of my body, zipping through the woods and hovering about 20 feet over Bear's body. And I was able to
Wow.
find him. And my husband at the time and I were able to bury him. And so, I was just like, what
Wow.
is this? What's going on? This is so
That
weird.
is fascinating. So, were you a little bit freaked out? by this, it sounds like you've had these kind of magical experiences your whole life, yet I know when they've happened to me, they've been somewhat freaking,
Mhm.
actually. Everybody thinks, oh wow, that's cool, but actually when it happens, there's a part of you that goes,
I
I
think
don't
I
know,
think because of my memory of being out of body at the age of 4, which felt
Mm,
more real than real, and I still remember like it happened yesterday.
wow.
This was similar. When you are out of body in awareness, in pure awareness,
Mm,
it's as if you are able to see reality for real for the first time. The colors are more vibrant. Everything is so much more, I don't know, everything is just heightened and beautiful. And it was very quick, but I was able to get the information and zap back in my body. And my husband at the time, his mother was married to a paranormal psychologist, and so they kind of understood. They kind of
I
thought,
see.
"Oh, this place is, you know, energetically charged or whatever."
Mm,
But I had always wanted to figure this out, so I just started studying mediumship and the psychic arts, and I combined my artistic interest with doing psychic art, and I created something called the colors of your question, where without knowing the question of somebody's life issue, I would ask them to pick 3 colors. From those colors, I would draw a reading, an orograph, or what I called a Claire circle, and do a reading on and getting answers to that person's question. And so this is an example of that experiment.
oh
And from that
wow.
experiment, I now do what are called photo transfers, which are watercolors, abstract watercolors, wherein I take a photograph. This is a person in spirit, and I peel away the paper. And as I'm peeling away the paper, I get information. And I do it over a period of a couple of days. So this particular gentleman, I got the email with his photograph from the woman who sent it to me in the middle of the night. I didn't open up the photograph, but as soon as I closed my eyes, I saw his sort of his profile with his eyes closed, wearing a baseball
Oh,
cap.
okay.
And the next morning, when I opened the email up and saw this picture of him with the baseball cap, and I was just like,
Mm.
okay, I got a connection. Let me just get started. And it was really, really beautiful, very beautiful experience. It's like being visited over a couple of days by spirit. And sometimes I dream about them and I get
Oh.
information as I'm working. And then it's presented to the person with a full page reading, and they get to keep this reminder of their loved one.
So just to describe it a little bit, you have on
God,
the
wow.
left-hand side, there is a photograph that you received after you had already had a psychic vision of this man. This is the photograph that they sent, and he does look, he's a young man with a beard, mustache, baseball
Mhm.
cap. He looks like a sporty kind of a guy. And then on the right-hand side, tell us a little bit about the colors and how you created. It almost looks like an abstract kind of painting. Tell us a little bit about how you make that. Is that your vision of their soul? Is that what, or a message? What do you think?
Well, originally, when I did this experiment, I would have people choose their colors, and
Mm,
I suddenly thought, okay, people are choosing their favorite colors. This is not right. I
yeah.
want the colors to have meaning from within. So I use my pendulum now to choose colors. So I got uh, the photograph. I didn't get any information about this young man. She just sent me a photograph, said he's in spirit. I said, okay. So the next morning I opened it. I was like, okay, cool. I saw him in the middle of the night when I closed my eyes. I drew that in crayon on the paper in
Wow.
yellow because the colors I got were red, black, and yellow.
Mm.
And I started painting, and I knew how exactly how I wanted him to be looking at the profile that I drew. And as I was peeling away the paper, because when you do a photo transfer, you photocopy the picture, you put gesso down on it after the watercolor's all dry, put it down, dry it, rub it off, and you're just very carefully rubbing away the layers of paper. And sometimes it comes off, it's not perfect. There are holes and it looks kind of like it's materializing on the page. That's what I love about it.
Oh, that's magical.
And so
So
and I got,
listen,
mhm.
I just want to ask you a little bit because we're coming down to our last 3 minutes, and I want
Oh
to make
no.
sure that I get a chance to ask you this. First of all, I'm offering this program as a way for people who might be wanting to ignite their own either mediumship or creative spirit. Is there a favorite tip or something that you might offer to a person who's listening and going, "Ooh, that sounds really awesome. I would like to at least try to do something"? Do you have either exercises or things that you do to kind of open up your creativity a little bit?
I think it's really important to realize that you don't have to be an artist to do this. And as you can see, there's another spirit portrait with a
Mm,
gentleman that I drew. And it's not like the best work of art. That's one of the reasons why I like working with photographs, because
mm.
you don't have to be an artist. You don't have to draw things. You can use photographs. You can use collage. Just do it. Clear your mind. Let everything come. Get into that place where you feel inspired. Just set a timer, 10 minutes a day, and you'll notice that an hour passes and it felt like 10 minutes. I think
Wow,
just doing it. I
just
have
do it.
taught people how to do orographs, and people who just can't draw a stick figure. The person who invented the orograph couldn't draw a stick figure, and
Mm,
he just did patterns. There's something called
wow,
Zentangling, which is drawing meditatively, just geometric patterns. Just do that. Just create, because
just
your
do
soul
it.
wants to create. That's what we're here for, creation.
Oh, so true. So, if you're interested, I hope that you will be after having seen Melanie's artwork. Maybe you want to talk with her further. Maybe you want a mediumship reading. Maybe you would like for her to do spirit art. I do need to mention that she also has a podcast worth listening to, which is called Psychic Play Date. Um, so, how do people find you, Melanie, to get in touch with you and all the things that you offer?
Well, I have a website, Melanie Alberts, and there's an S at the end, medium.com. You can email me at melanie@melaniealbertsmedium.com. I'm on Facebook, Melanie Alberts Spirit and Psychic Art, and on Instagram, it's Claire Circle Spirit Art. You can find me those places, and I would love to hear from anybody who want to just talk about it. You don't have to sign up for a reading. That's if you're just interested. I can also do mentoring one-on-one. I just love to talk about it. I could talk about it all day.
Oh, this has been so wonderful. I'm so appreciative that you took time to stop by the Psychic Playroom today. And once again, Melanie Alberts, artist, poet, actor, podcaster, medium, psychic, and really cool human being. So, thank you so much for coming today. And yes, hopefully, we will talk to you again soon.
Thank you. It was an honor and a pleasure.
So there you have it, a lovely interview with Melanie Alberts. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. She's a wonderful, very talented, very creative lady. I'm going to put her information up on the screen. As I mentioned during the interview, she has her own podcast as well, which is called Psychic Playdate. She also has a website. She does mediumship as well as her creative work. So I'm going to put her website and the link to her podcast as well up here so that you can check it out. And meanwhile, I'm going to, in my closing words, I just want to encourage you, as I did at the beginning of our episode today. It's all about the muse, it's all about you. If you've been holding on to the dream of wanting to do something creative, I cannot encourage you enough. The time is right. Is that was a good Freudian slip. The time is right to write that book, create that song, go take those piano lessons, or whatever else it is that has been tugging at your heartstrings. Walk out in the street and take some pictures and post them. Share yourself and share your creativity with the world, because it is very, very, very much needed. So that brings us to the close of another episode of Carolyn's Psychic Playroom. If you would like me to do a psychic reading for you on the air, please write me at psychicplayroom@gmail.com, and I will put your reading on the air. And meanwhile, I wish you all the highest and best, most beautiful time until we meet again. Bye for now.
Thoughts are things with the energy to make life better for you and for me. Touch the light.